Welcome.
Hello, hi Lucy.
Hi, Paul. And good day, everyone. Welcome to the what was previously a webinar that is now a meeting to discuss the Ocean InfoHub project in the Pacific Small Island Developing States region. We are probably still waiting for a few people to come in, but the meeting will be fairly informal. So I think let's start the discussion and then people can join when they're ready. It is a very busy day today, being World Ocean Day. So happy World Ocean Day to everybody today. The purpose of the meeting or the discussion that we'll carry out in the next hour and a bit is to provide an update on the Ocean InfoHub project and the Ocean Data and Information System, invite additional partners to follow or to participate in the project, demonstrate a working example of ODIS, showcase regional working examples of ODIS, and the work that's being developed by SPC and SPREP, and then show some of the work that's being done towards the development of a training course for later this year. So welcome everybody, and thanks for being here today. So I'll hand over to Zulfi.
Thank you, Lucy. Bula Vinaka and Talofa, everyone. That's greetings from Fiji and Samoa, where the two organizations for the Pacific SIDS are based. And as Lucy has said, for some of you, it's 8th of June. But nonetheless, happy World Oceans Day. And it's good to see, I mean, in a short period of time that we have participants joining in. So indeed, that's a good sign. And as Lucy earlier alluded to, you know, we have changed the format of this event from a webinar to a meeting, you know, so we could keep it a little bit informal as well as discuss further on the progress and steps forward in terms of moving forward with the Ocean InfoHub project. So on behalf of Ocean InfoHub project, I'd like to welcome you all and thanks for joining in. So today's meeting will be, you know, getting updates from the two organizations from the Pacific SIDS, as well as from the Ocean InfoHub components of the project. So we have an agenda that is on the Google Drive. You can access it as well as the presentations are made available there as well. And you'll be able to access the presentations after this meeting session as well. So I'll just briefly go through the outline of the agenda. First, we will have an update from Lucy, followed by a presentation from Paul. So thanks, Paul, for joining in from his busy schedule. So the SPREP is an additional partner for the PC from the PC's region, followed by a presentation from myself. And then we'll have here on ODIS by Pia Luigi, as well as some example of ODIS from Tobias. And finally, we'll end off with the Ocean InfoHub training course from Lucy, as well as questions and answers and discussions for way forward. So thank you once again. And I'll now invite Lucy to give an update on the Ocean InfoHub project. In terms of housekeeping, yeah, because the number is quite small, so we don't have to go through the, you know, a formal procedure, but just respect each other's views and, you know, keep yourself muted if you are not speaking. And if you indeed are speaking, then please switch on your video as well so we can see each other. So thank you, and Lucy, over to you.
Thanks very much, Zulfi. And thanks very much for sharing the presentation. Thanks. So today, just to start off with, I've got a short presentation as a general overview of the Ocean InfoHub project, a general update of where the project is from a global perspective. Next slide. For those who are new to the project, it's a global initiative to improve access to marine and coastal data and information. This project commenced in April 2020 and it's funded by the Government of Flanders, Kingdom of Belgium. The objective of the project is to develop interoperability between existing information systems and thus improving the flow of information to end users. Next slide. The three main objectives are firstly, that the project will link a network of hubs that will be able to exchange data and information and thus contribute to the transfer of marine technology by enhancing shared scientific and technical capacities to render a wide range of data and information products and services available. The project will develop a proof of concept for an underlying ocean data and information systems architecture together with partners in a co-design process. And the project will develop regional or thematic end user communities of practice to promote and foster awareness and collaboration with established organizations and systems, providing information, connecting contributors and users with the resources to support their efforts. Next slide. We have three related initiatives: the Ocean InfoHub project, the IOC Ocean and Data Information System Catalog of Data Sources, ODIS CAT, which currently describes over 2,000 online sources of marine and coastal data in 16 categories, and the Ocean Data and Information System. The three projects are very closely linked. The Ocean InfoHub project has developed the first phase of the architecture underpinning ODIS and is concerned with involving user communities and establishing proof of concept of ODIS. Next. The Ocean InfoHub will first work with global IOC associated online resources, including Ocean Expert, Aqueducts. Next slide. And the next slide, the Ocean-Based Practices and the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, the World Ocean Database. Next slide, and next slide. And this is extended by partnerships with Eurasian, marinetraining.eu, IMODNet, and other sources in the ODIS catalog of sources. Next slide. And next one, and next one. So we have 6 initial data types. These are data types that were identified by our regional partners and project partners. And these 6 data categories are also data categories in ODIS CAT. They are people and institutions, documents, spatial data and maps, training opportunities, vessels, and projects. Next slide, please. And we have 3 pilot regions: the Africa region, the Latin American region, and the Pacific Small Island Developing States region. So these regions have participated in the development of the proposal for the project. And in fact, SPC and SPREP were both partners in the formulation of the project proposal. So really from early on, and they will take a lead on pilot projects to test interoperability between existing information hubs. Next slide, please. This schematic shows some examples of existing data and information hubs at national, regional, or global scale. A global ocean data and information system architecture will be developed to enable interoperability with local, regional, and thematic infrastructures. This will be developed with willing and able early adopters in a co-design process. And this architecture is based on lightweight schema.org implementation patterns. Next slide, please. Although anyone can implement ODIS, and it can be used independently of any IOC system, we will be developing a global search hub, also as a proof of concept or global demonstration of ODIS. And some services that may be offered include finding specific expertise, finding vessel-based training opportunities, peer-to-peer collaboration, finding data or information, finding spatial data or metadata. Next slide. And these activities and services are all in support of the IOC capacity development strategy. The project will focus on the transfer of local knowledge, on supporting early career scientists, and on remedying gender disparity by increasing access to information, technologies, and opportunities. Next slide. And the project supports global reporting. It will assist countries in their reporting requirements for the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. The project will also assist IOC member states to report on ocean science capacities through the Global Ocean Science Report. Next slide, please. Some of our achievements to date have included establishing an active technical working group using GitHub, Slack, and meeting platforms, which has over 70 members from all over the world now and over 2,600 posts in the discussion forum. And this is an open discussion forum that is welcome, that is open to all partners. Next slide, please. We've developed documentation for the ODIS architecture for all 6 priority themes, and this is available online. Next slide. And we've developed proof of concept for the ODIS architecture with the demonstration of OneSearch returning results from 3 systems, marinetraining.eu, Ocean Expert, and OBIS. Next slide. We have developed the 3 regional communities of practice, implementing 1 or more of the patterns, and these communities continue to grow. Next slide, please. And we have increasing visibility and interest from around the world. And final slide. In conclusion, the Ocean InfoHub project will facilitate better access to global databases, but also better visibility of national and regional data holdings. Regions and countries can learn from each other. Africa, Pacific, and the Latin America and Caribbean regions all have success stories that they can share with each other. And again, the development and implementation principles are based on co-design. So the project seeks the participation of a wide range of partners and end user communities. And we welcome involvement from additional partners. So thanks very much, Sophie. And that's our
Thank
website.
you. Thank you, Lucy, for your very informative presentation, and good to see the progress so far under the current circumstances with the pandemic. So well done on your part. So colleagues, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to put them in the chat box so we could attend to that later on. Yeah, thank you. So I will now invite Paul, my colleague from the Pacific, to give his presentation. Paul, over to you. We have a copy of your presentation if you want the technicians to, unless you can slide share.
Well, let me slideshow because Tavita was going to present yesterday because I had interviews, but since it's today, I'm going to present. So I've changed the cut a little bit. So if you don't mind, I'll drive from this side. Now, can you see that, Zulfi?
Yep,
Yes.
I can see the slides and I can hear you loud and clear, please.
Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry about the slight delay in the setup. My name is Paul Anderson. I work at SPREP. I'm working remotely for some time now due to COVID. And I'll just do a really quick presentation on the network of national data portals in the Pacific that we hope OIH will take advantage of to share and distribute information. So just a little bit of background about SPREP. Like SPC and our colleagues over in Noumea and Fiji, SPREP serves 14 Pacific Island countries, 7 Pacific Island territories, and has 5 metropolitan members. Our mandated areas are waste, climate change, climate adaptation, climate science, climate mitigation, biodiversity, conservation, invasive species, migratory species, and environmental governance. That's where this INFORM project that has developed the Pacific Environment Portal Network sits. In this network, we built that in 2017 to address a gap in national data management, data use, data sharing across 14 countries and now a couple of territories as well. Primarily looking at backing up, storing, sharing, and publishing environmental data sets from those sectors I just noted, which SPREP feels the ocean fits right in the middle of. We started off with about 100 data sets, as well over 9,000 now. And we have fairly good uptake with the countries. We're now in the 4th year of implementation The project continues for 1 year. The network of data portals continues post-project. You'll note in this stand-like diagram, the countries feed into a central repository that sits at SPREP, that's the Pacific Environment Portal, and that repository connects via Harvest scripts and API to other partners. So we can share information from countries upward and from the globe regionally to countries. The national data portals are all built on Drupal. We've just done a migration from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9, so it's a stable content management system. There'll be a front-end update later in 2021. The API is a JSON format. However, we're looking at rolling out a JSON LD format later in 2021 to be compliant with the OIH architecture. In addition to the network of countries, there's also the Pacific data ecosystem, of which SPREP and SPC are the primary members. So there are already existing Harvest scripts between SPREP, SPC, the countries, and additional data resources within both organizations. So at SPREP, we have the Pacific Environment Information Library that we harvest information from and publish for countries. There's also the Pacific, the Protected Area Portal, which harvests information from the Pacific Environment Portal. The point is, there is a good network of information being shared within the Pacific region, and this project has the potential to bring information from outside and make that available to our members. That's the URL. We note that there's one additional metadata format that needs to be applied, and we have plans to do that probably in September 2021. And I'd be happy to take any questions and look forward to the discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul, for your presentation. Yeah, nice one. So colleagues, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. So it's my turn to present. So if you could share the slides, please. Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to present. I was supposed to present this together with my colleague Sioli from the Pacific Data Hub, who is based in Noumea, New Caledonia, but he has a series of interviews to run today, so he sent his apologies. So he is the person behind the technical arm of the Pacific Data Hub, which I will introduce, or which I will talk about. So apologies from his end. Next slide, please. Yeah, just very briefly, I'm sure for some of you would have already seen some of my slides previously, but this is just for those who have joined in for this meeting in particular. Just like SPREP, SPC is a regional organization based in the Pacific, and our main mandate is to provide advisory and support to the countries in the Pacific in terms of technical and scientific aspects. And within SPC, we have 8 divisions and program areas, and I come from the Geoscience, Energy, and Maritime GEM. Thank you. And next slide, please. Yeah, so SPC was established in 1947 in the region, and there have been lots of ad hoc projects, programs happening over the years in terms of ocean science, in terms of maritime fisheries, environment, etc., etc. So very recently, an initiative was born in the region, PICOS, Pacific Community Center of Ocean Science, and my colleagues from PICOS have joined in the meeting as well, Jerome and Katie. So the main objective was to coordinate the work areas of ocean science in the region, knowing that it's a high priority for our region and for the decade program as well. So I wanted to highlight that one of the um, key areas for PICOs would be to enhance data collection and provide data management services to our ocean community in the region. Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can click on the PICOs relating to a number of SDGs, and then we have about close to 70 people working in the ocean science arena under the PICOs banner. From SPC's end, we do undertake a number of ocean marine observations, and we have numerous data portals as well and data management aspects. So we do undertake oceanography campaigns for our member countries. We have networks of tide gauges, we do wave observations, and then we have databases as well as project portals, which has all these data sets and information which is accessed by users. Next slide, please. Just some example of our observing instrumentation. We do CTD, we do current, waves, water level, tides, as well as shallow and deep water bathymetry. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I was thinking, to show what we used to do previously from an organizational perspective in terms of oceanography campaigns that we used to run. So we, after the campaign had ended, because these used to be ad hoc projects, so we would bring these data sets, process it, analyze it, and store it into our local, computers, local servers, and at the same time produce technical reports, which used to be housed um, in our internal library. So in terms of data socialization, it was really poor, I would say. And if somebody really wanted to work in that particular area, it would be quite challenging to discover those particular data sets. I mean, the reports were there, which at the same time were technical reports and possibly not exposed to an international, on an international level. However, as Paul mentioned earlier on, information sharing is quite working well in the region, except for the connection with the global initiative. So, yeah, just wanted to mention that. Next slide, please. So just like PICOS, in the region, we realized that in the region as well as within SPC, we realized with the ad hoc projects, we had a number of web portals, databases coming up. And then when you look at the sustainability of it, that becomes an issue because as the project's life ends, so does the support to the respective platform. So an initiative was undertaken as well to coordinate and strengthen data management, data storage initiative for the region. And so we came up with the Pacific Data Hub. And Sioli, my colleague, is currently the program manager. Unfortunately, he's not here this morning. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the main idea of the Pacific Data Hub is to, uptake, do data discovery in the region, do data management, and look for capabilities to merge with other platforms, and at the end of the day, to make an impact with the data and information that we have. Next slide, please. Yeah, and at the beginning, and perhaps now, these are some of our challenges, coordination. There's so many things happening in the data space. How do we coordinate? And it's really, as Paul mentioned earlier on, for us to join on board with Ocean InfoHub, to improve our coordination, as well as if you look at challenges, one of the major challenges is capacity, the lack of tools, the lack of systems and processes. At the same time, the lack of personnel, data scientists or system developers, the countries face more of this, and at an organizational or regional level, we do have the capacity, but at the same time, there are challenges with other priorities as well. Of course, with sustainability as well, in terms of funding, in terms of supporting these initiatives, and then access of data. We are trying to change that mindset in the region to move more towards open data initiatives. So these challenges still are in the region, but we are trying slowly to overcome those. Thanks. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just to a concept of our data journey within the Pacific Data Hub. Collection of data sets, identifying, then producing publications, releasing this information, and then ensuring these data sets are actually used by people. They are not just stored on the servers. And finally, we would like to really see that all these initiatives make an impact down to a national or a country level. So the main objective is to increase the value of these data sets. Next slide, please. I can go to the next slide. Thank you. This is just a schematic of the Pacific Data Hub. We have the data layers, catalog portals, as well as the visualization and exploration attributes. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, in terms of previous slide, please. In terms of the technology behind Pacific Data Hub, we have a number of servers. We use thread server, we have GeoServer, and then we have data catalogs, portals, and then the dashboard and tools we have for visualization and exploration. Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of the Pacific Data Hub, and the data sets are characterized based on the thematic areas. As SPC in the region not only focuses on ocean science, geoscience, we have social dimensions, we have education, we have health. So a number of these data sets are collected with the Pacific Data Hub. However, they are based on these various thematic areas. And if you can see on the upper left, currently we have data sets from various organizations as well. And as Paul earlier mentioned too, SPREP and SPC as well aligned in terms of exchanging information and sharing data as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, I talked about this during one of our earlier conversations, possible linkages and things that we could try out with the Ocean InfoHub initiative. And first attempt would be to look at documentation, ocean best practices, and how we can have that within our system with the Pacific Data Hub as well. And then, as Lucy mentioned earlier on, the various categories, experts, institutions, maps, vessels as well, and professional listings as well. So from our side, one of the challenges had been staff turnover during this pandemic. And for some of you would know that Alex used to join me with the Ocean InfoHub initiative from SPCs, but now he's with the another program, and Sioli has joined in. So currently we are still trying to sort ourselves out on how better we can work with the Ocean InfoHub project. So we haven't made that much of a progress from our end, perhaps compared to other regions. However, I think the way forward for us would be to have more focus interaction with the Ocean InfoHub colleagues, as well as the developers of this project. Next slide, please. Yeah, just this finally on the Data Hub, we have a number of goals and focus areas from within SPC and how it connects with global initiatives. Thank you. Thanks for listening in. That's the end of my presentation. You could check out the Data Hub on the website, as well as email of our colleague with the Data Hub. So thank you for listening in. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them on the chat box. Our next presentation is on the Ocean Data and Information System. And we have Pierluigi. Apologies if I haven't pronounced your name properly. If you, I think you are, oh yeah, you are here. Thanks for joining in. I'm not sure how the timing is for you, but thanks once again, and over to you.
It's okay. I don't sleep much these days, and there's always crime to fight in Bremen, so it's all right. But thank you very much for the introduction. So Lucy mentioned the ODIS, or the Ocean Data and Information System, and I'll go a little bit into the conceptual model of that here, and also how we've tested it. That will come next in a more technical description by Tobias. But what I'll talk about here is the conceptual overview of ODIS, what it is, and how the different data nodes and systems are involved in it. The first thing to say is that ODIS is not something that is run by IODE. ODIS is the sum of all of the contributing systems. So it's a system of systems. Every system around the world that has ocean data can be a part of ODIS, and together that is this system. What IODE is concerned with is linking them together. I'll go into that a little bit during the presentation. There we go. One more. There we go. So background, and I think this has already been well articulated in the previous presentations. There are lots of solutions out there that are emerging at local scales, national scales, and regional scales. And this is only going to increase. The number of stakeholders that are getting connected to digital systems and are using digital systems and have digital assets that they'd like to share is increasing very, very quickly. And that's great. But at the same time, we have to make sure that they're talking to each other, and they're talking to each other in stable ways. The same way that we know that we can search on the internet and use HTML to find things. It's a protocol that allows us to search across so many things. We need something similar for the more advanced kinds of data and metadata that we're sharing, so that it's easier for these systems to talk to each other without investing too much time and resources in doing that. So what we have now, however, is wonderful systems that do impressive things, but they tend to be networked in different ways. And some of them are not even part of it. Some of them they don't feel as if they can connect. They feel that they're too local and they don't have anything to do with the bigger game, so to speak. But we'd like to change that a little bit and say that everybody has a voice in this, and everybody's digitized data, their information, their knowledge, if they wish to digitize it, all of that can be accessed. All of that is important. And we probably need all of it to face the challenges that are coming our way in this next decade of trying to engage more with the ocean for sustainable development and also for science. So what do we need? We need something more like a digital glue to help bring this together. We certainly need that across UN systems, but of course, systems that are not part of the UN data space are as important, if not more important, because they're larger at the end of the day in sum and in terms of their capabilities, especially in the private sector, and many more. On that note, I'd like to reiterate that we're really convinced at this stage that there won't be the one solution to rule them all that's going to change the game such that, okay, we just need to use this portal or this new hub and everything's going to be fine. It's going to change in different contexts and different spatial scales. You'll need a different solution that really understands the problem at that place and at that time with those people and with that culture. So it's really important that those resources, no matter how small they are linked in to the global system without having to have extra overhead. Just maybe a little bit of way to express what they have, but not something that they have to maintain and invest valuable resources into. So that's our motivation. We need something to help these things interoperate persistently, sustainably, with low cost. And this is the concept behind ODIS, or the Ocean Data and Information System. So the mission here is to build this digital ecosystem, so where things are organically interconnected, so all ocean stakeholders can participate. And this word, the digital ecosystem here, it's not a metaphor, it's a technical term. And we'll get to its meaning in a moment. Just to say, we're not being fluffy with our language here. We quite mean what we say. How do we accomplish this? Well, the technology that acts as this glue, it should be very robust. So it shouldn't be too complicated. If things change, it shouldn't disrupt the whole system. It should be easy to implement, meaning that people should already have a feeling about some of the underlying technologies so that you can easily hire somebody or train somebody to implement it. And it should be as neutral as possible in terms of national or regional needs. Because we're trying to connect multiple regions, we have to find that median between them, that they can do the work they need to do in their region and also just share that across to another one without having something that is exchanged that may be misunderstood by another system. So that's the role, and I think that's the primary role, a kind of digital diplomacy of IODE, to help buffer this and to help those conversations happen, as we do in these webinar series, to learn from the regions and try to find that balance. So the glue itself is something we call the ODIS arc, the ODIS architecture, which is a specification of interoperability using schema.org. And again, schema.org is very well used because of Google Dataset Search and others. It is quite lightweight and robust. It's reasonably easy to find somebody to hire or to train to use it. And what we do is try to specify how to use it in order to connect across those digital themes that Lucy mentioned earlier, the experts and institutions, the vessels, spatial data, etc. That list will expand as we learn more about the regions and their needs, and we welcome all stakeholders to say, look, we really need this kind of data. It's very vital for our region, and we can start to find out how to use schema.org and other alternatives we're looking at to express that. Right, once we have that, then we can start to map out the system automatically. Most every project that has a, let's say, multi-stakeholder focus says, well, we first need a landscape analysis of the digital ecosystem. And this takes time to do, and it's always changing. It would be much better if we have that architecture and we basically ask in real time, what's the status? And we get a report back. So that's the goal there. So back to that term, digital ecosystem. So that's the definition of it. So it's organic, it's distributed, there's no one hub. If something stops working, or if, for example, if we can't maintain ODIS anymore, as from the IODE side, the thing still works. It doesn't depend on a central hub, and that's very, very important for these solutions. And that's why we're trying not to create a new centralized system, but help things that exist link together in a way that can last beyond the lifetime of any one of the nodes. It self-organizes based on the needs and based on how you can extend these. Again, nobody owns it, and it's scalable because of that. And the key thing there is that it's a socio-technical system. And as a data scientist and working here, I think we have all the technology we need. Of course, we need new technologies for new tasks, but in terms of this task, we have all the technology we need. The challenge is getting this sort of sociological agreement between stakeholders that yes, this can work for us. And that's where we're focusing our efforts, with of course technical support to make it happen. So that's the concept. It's an e-environment where anyone can discover data. You can push data to it. You can pull data from it, from all of the other nodes in ODIS. And anyone can participate in it, as long as you're in the catalog or as long as you expressed your data in the schema.org patterns that are open on our GitHub repository, where your technical teams can look at. And again, there will be training opportunities for that. Very importantly, all of the nodes inside ODIS are independent, and they should be free to run internal operations independently. We're not going to tell you how to run your systems. You know how to do that for your local and regional needs. The only thing is that what you wish to express to the global system, here's a specification on how to do it, and there are services waiting to pull that into linked open data and semantic web technologies to allow other people to query it, and Ocean InfoHub is an example of how that happens. Exactly, and that's the use of ODIS Arc. Right, so we're not a hub, and hubs are needed, of course. Hubs play a very important role, but for ODIS, we decided that no, the web itself is our hub, and those nodes can be hubs. They're like meta nodes in the system. They can be hubs or anything else, and we will use those linked open data technologies to link across them and allow one node to check in on what other nodes have. And that's really important because that's the sort of future that we'd like to see that if you query the Pacific hub, you can also cross-query the European one and the Latin American one at the same time through the ODIS architecture. And without having to customize your system in a bilateral way, there's a kind of lingua franca that's focused around the data themes that we have. Schema.org is already there, but we need to stabilize the implementation of that to focus on some of the issues that we're going to handle as a global ocean community, right? And again, Ocean Info Hub is an example of how you can pull in data from across those nodes. Lucy already mentioned the independent resources that we can pull in to very quickly spin up a hub without having to centralize data. You just push and pull and you're always up to date because you're watching what that node is pushing out and you can refresh that. So that fluffy idea that we've had in the past of this general global linked data universe, we're giving that some structure with ODIS and ODIS architecture, such that the UN systems and other partners and regional systems can push and pull data to it, metadata at this stage, and then eventually more low-level data to create regional nodes, global hubs, regional hubs, thematic nodes, what have you, right? And that's how we start to build this thing. This is how we start to build the digital ocean ecosystem in a very practical sense, in a very concrete sense. So we can place people in their niches or the places in the system. Some will be producers of data, others primary consumers that will create new data products or refinements on data products, like indicators or what have you. And then it'll be further processed by secondary, tertiary, quaternary consumers, which could be dashboards and digital twins now are coming up. And also those that will recycle data or digital artifacts that come out of these and use that too. Again, data, the more you use it, the more valuable it gets. The more you link it, the more valuable it gets. And so as we start to build a more densely connected ecosystem, it's like becoming a healthier forest in a way. There's more diversity in there. The organisms sort of, they challenge each other, but they keep the whole system healthy. And we'd like to sort of emulate that on the digital side. I'm an ecologist at heart, so I like to think in these terms. As a closing idea, sort of big picture, ODIS is, we're trying to build one digital ecosystem for a compartment of our planet. Other groups and agencies are working on other compartments, and eventually we'll have to merge them all together into a sort of living digital biosphere where we can ask these questions that cut across all of these communities. The things in the SDGs, the things that we face in our local communities, they're not neatly compartmentalized in boxes. They are very organic. And as we start to merge these digital ecosystems, we can start querying across a digital biosphere for complex things like what makes a resilient food system from the oceans to the deserts. That's the challenge in front of us. And we start small, but as we've seen already in our prototypes, it is working. We can start small, lightweight, but very effective. And from there, we can grow in a principled manner and develop the back end of the data and to help power portals and front end applications. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre, for a very nice presentation, and I really like the various concepts highlighted by you. The e-environment as well as using web as a collective hub. Yeah, really nice. Looks really good and promising as well. So I think we'll do Q&A towards the end. So if we can go on to the next item from Tobias Pierce, looking at working examples of ODIS. And this will be a video.
Ocean Data and Information System Architecture Demonstration. This presentation provides an overview of the Ocean Data and Information System Architecture, or ODIS Arc, and its purpose. It describes the basic processes to implement ODIS Arc and how to leverage resources published via ODIS Arc. And finally, this presentation demonstrates some of the current progress on the development of ODIS Arc and its implementation, using a data set from the Ocean Biodiversity Information System as an example. So to set the context, what is ODIS Arc? ODIS Arc is a lightweight architecture which follows best practices for data on the web. Essentially, it is metadata markup. It employs schema patterns based on schema.org, and the content is encoded as JSON linked data, or JSON LD. And it leverages vocabularies that are already established in order to reduce duplication of effort and improving interoperability. And the approach we're taking is a co-development approach. So working to identify core schema patterns for resources, and we're doing that in partnership with implementation partners. So, from the perspective of a resource provider, so whether it's a data set or other resource site, this, ODIS Arc is really about metadata enrichment and implementation using an approach that is standardized and is recognized and really is driven for direct use via the web. So, what are we describing? Um, the Ocean InfoHub project um, under the International Oceanographic Data and Information Exchange uh, is currently focused on 6 core content types: documents, experts and institutions, spatial data maps, training, vessels, and projects. However, the intent is to actually scale the architecture up, and previous work completed by IODE on the ODIS catalog of sources actually identified 16 core resource types that were deemed to be of critical value. And the intent is that over time we'll be developing schema patterns for each of these types. The implementation of ODIS Arc focuses on 2 primary use cases. First is that of the resource publisher. So this is the group that is supporting content producers and undertaking the technical work required to implement ODIS Arc metadata markup. And ultimately, they're involved in the publication and hosting of that enriched metadata for broad reuse. The second use case focuses on resource aggregators. So these are the groups that are basically indexing that ODIS Arc compliant metadata content and producing and providing a federated view of published resources. And usually that will be through some lightweight search facility implemented as some form of regional or thematic node or hub. Both of these use cases are supported through the implementation and co-development of the schema.org metadata schema patterns, the development of lightweight search and indexing tools, the resource aggregators themselves are supporting the community by the implementation of regional and thematic nodes and hubs, which themselves can be indexed. And finally, between the Ocean InfoHub project team and in the broader data on the web communities, there's plenty of support available, whether it's hands-on, documentation, and training. The most basic implementation of ODIS Arc is comprised of a 3-step process and can be achieved with little more than a commodity web server. First, once the resource provider has created metadata for the resource being described, the resource publisher then needs to undertake the technical work to transform that to an ODIS Arc compliant format. And this metadata is then embedded in an HTML page that describes the resource. Once the process has been established for producing the ODIS Arc compliant metadata content and encoding that at the individual resource level, the next step is to basically advertise the list of resources that are available to be indexed by external resource aggregators. And that is done using something as simple as a sitemap, which is essentially just a list of indexable resources. Once the list of indexable resources has been established, this then needs to be advertised to resource aggregators for use in indexing and downstream use. This can be done in one of 2 ways. First, the URL of the sitemap file itself can be provided specifically to known resource aggregators. But the more flexible approach is to essentially use something like a robots.txt file, which basically allows the resource publisher to point to the sitemap file and advertise that to pretty much any indexing service operating across the internet. once this process is complete, then the resources are readily available for indexing and use in downstream portals and other facilities. Once the resource publication process is complete, these resources can then be used by resource aggregators. The resource aggregators will set up processes to scour the web for content marked up in a recognized form, such as ODIS ARC, and use this information to produce information graphs for query purposes. Indexing this content can be targeted, which means that the resource aggregator is looking at specific websites for content that can be indexed, or it may be non-targeted, which means that they're essentially scouring the web and finding whatever they can, and then using queries after the fact to evaluate the relevance. Many tools are available, open source tools or commercial, to facilitate the indexing process. The knowledge graphs produced as a result of indexing can then be used as sources of information for use in driving websites, APIs, and so on. Many tools exist to support the hosting and leverage of these generated information graphs. The following few slides outline some of the progress that is currently being made on the ongoing co-development of ODIS ARC and its implementation using a data set currently hosted in the Ocean Biodiversity Information System as an example. It should be important to note that this is demonstrating just a small subset of the ODIS architecture. A website has been set up to demonstrate the use of ODIS ARC compliant metadata, and the underlying technology that is being developed for this site is available on GitHub and is intended to help new resource aggregators learn the concepts of content indexing, the query facilities, and to provide a simple set of tools that can be extended and embedded into an existing web presence. It's important to stress that the metadata that's being used to generate the index, which underlies this sample website, is also available to the world. So that would include other engines such as Google Dataset Search. And where Google's dataset search is focused on data only, ODIS ARC extends this further into other content types, and it actually allows linking between different types of resources. Starting with the demonstration site, we can search for the word coral, and we will discover one of the data sets that was exposed by OBIS via ODIS ARC. If we then proceed to Google Dataset Search, and we search for the title of the first record that was returned when we search for coral, we'll find the same data set that was discovered through the ODIS ARC search portal, as well as OBIS. And what's critical here is that Google Dataset Search even extends a bit further and provides a listing of other sites where this particular resource has been harvested and advertised. The ODIS architecture provides a lightweight approach for resource providers to significantly improve the discoverability of the resources without adding significant amounts of undue effort on the part of themselves or their resource publishing support staff. Much of the content needed to drive ODIS ARC is actually being produced, just not in forms not readily reusable by others via the web. And a modest investment in supplementing existing metadata and data publication pipelines can yield great returns. And consider participating in the World Wide Web of open data.
Thanks for producing the video for us, Tobias, and great to hear some of the working examples of ODIS. Our final presentation is on the InfoHub training course, so I'd like to invite once again Lucy, if you'd like to
Thanks, Sophie.
comment your presentation. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Alex. So this short presentation is on the plans for development of a training course that will take place towards the end of 2021. Next slide, please. So the Ocean InfoHub project, together with the Ocean Teacher Global Academy and other partners, is in the process of developing a training course to be delivered online. The first course would be in English, and thereafter we plan for Spanish and French language versions to suit the Latin America and Caribbean and Africa regions. So we hope that the first course will be delivered between September and December this year and repeated or extended in 2022. Next slide, please. The title of the course is Implementing the Ocean Data and Information System Architecture, and the course's central aims are to equip participants with a conceptual understanding of what ODIS is, why it's been created, and how it works. So to equip participants with conceptual and practical understandings of the technical components of ODIS, including its use of schema.org patterns and web-based publishing and harvesting, and to provide participants with the tools they need to describe their data or metadata and publish it. Next, please. The expected learning outcomes are a good understanding of the Ocean InfoHub project, the Ocean Data and Information System, and an understanding of how to incorporate ODIS schema.org patterns into existing online databases or websites. So the target audience should have an understanding of JSON and the HTML document object model, and how to configure extensions to their web framework if a framework is being used. Next slide. The course content would include high-level concepts of the Ocean InfoHub project and ODIS, a general introduction to the use of schema.org, ODIS schema.org patterns, setting the standard publishing or contribution environment, harvesting patterns, and querying harvested material. Next slide. And for more information, as we develop the training course, we'll send updates via our mailing list, or if you'd like to be informed personally when the course is announced, you can just let me know by email. And we'll also circulate it widely and post it on the website and use channels like that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lucy, for your presentation. Yeah, indeed, it's great to have this training initiative with all these activities progressing with the Ocean InfoHub. So yeah, great initiative. So that was our final presentation. Now we have the question and answer session. So please, if you would like to make a comment or ask any question, use the raise hand feature with the Zoom platform. And also you could put up your comments or questions on the chat box. But there's an interesting conversation already happening. Perhaps I would like to invite Pierre-Luigi if you would like to talk more on that. Thank you.
That was just in response. The first thing that I emphasized is that we try to follow this idea of data democratization in the sense that anyone who implements these schema.org records or little advertisements on their web pages can become an ODIS node. You don't need to be a big hub. You don't need to be a very complex data service. Really just anyone with some good data or a good idea that wishes to advertise that to the rest of the world can put that onto their web page, even a single website, and share that data. This, of course, has its risks along with its benefits, but for the moment we see more benefits than risks. It just opens things up. It opens things up that even communities that are just getting digitized, they can already start to share things and have their voice being heard. And I think that's a very important function for increased multilateralism and democratic digital systems. So that's one point. Taco then asked if we could elaborate a little bit on that. And then I referred to Tobias's presentation because he was showing the technical aspect of it. And one additional thing I mentioned there is that there is something called ODIS CAT, the ODIS Catalog of Sources, which has been in operation for quite a while. And it's like an index of known ocean data providers. So that could be a backbone to be a much more efficient place to search to say who's in ODIS, but it won't be exhaustive. There will be people in ODIS that we don't know about, And therefore, things like web crawlers, etc., what Google does to find data sets, those can also be used. And as Tobias said, the nice sort of side effect of using this architecture is that it will show up in Google dataset search too. So it's like, it's not just something you do for IODE, it's something that's generally useful. It just has some more consistency across the community. And the same way that providers can share data, it works the other way around too. Anyone can set up a small hub. You can pull metadata and things into it. Now, ODIS doesn't promise that the data at the end of these metadata records is standardized or so. That would be the next phase to encourage and help the community build standards where they don't exist when it comes to formats and files, etc. But for the moment, at least knowing who has what and where it is already something very useful for building data systems. That's it in the chat.
Thank you, Pierluigi, for your in-depth explanation. Yeah, and something that, perhaps those who, as the Ocean InfoHub project evolves, we can just not limit it to those who are actually working, but others who, as you say, have good data sets can actually link with the ODIS architecture. So yeah, great explanation on that. And any further questions if anybody has? Yeah, Taco, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvie. Following up on my previous question, and after hearing Lucy's presentation on the training course, I do understand that all the topics necessary to become part of ODIS and Ocean InfoHub, for that matter, will be discussed and taught during the training course. But then, following up my question to Pierluigi, you call this lightweight schema.org application. We also learned that from previous presentations that resources, men and women power to make things work is an issue for many of our data systems all around the globe. Can you say something about adding I don't know whether it exists, but a typical data hub? We learned from Paul and from Sylvie that the data hubs presently available in the Pacific region are well organized. Such a well organized and maintained data hub, data portal, to add that to the ODIS, make it become part of the ODIS system. Is that days work, or is that many months, or are you talking about years or so to do that? You're muted, still muted there.
Okay, it'll take me, it's late here. I forgive myself the muting thing. Even though we've been doing the Zoom thing for how many months now. But so it certainly won't take years. As we've seen from the Ocean InfoHub progress, once we figured out the ODIS backend, building this graph of connected systems, creating a hub that picks that up is not that difficult. Again, of course, it takes some of the right expertise, but we're not using expertise that are extremely rare or hard to learn. And one of the things we've been very particular about is that everything that we're doing to build ODIS and Ocean InfoHub is documented. There's example code, example implementations, which can be copy pasted into local context, tested, and there's some, with a few modifications, it can be run. I mean, I'm reluctant to say that it's easy. It really depends on the context, but we're trying to make it as reproducible as possible and as generic as possible. There's also the side from the Ocean InfoHub. If that's close to what is needed, it's easy to create regional implementations of the Ocean InfoHub system to say that, okay, here's one that matches certain needs in the Pacific area for the current state of the ODIS architecture. As time goes by and the architecture starts to specify more complex data types, then I think that would be more to the capacity level. I mean, whoever wants to use it, it wouldn't be something we would maintain reference implementations for. But that's also the beautiful thing, because it's not that those implementations have to come from IODE. If somebody figures out a creative way to use ODIS and the architecture and wishes to share a reference implementation for others to modify to their needs, they can do it. Everything's open. There's nothing that requires our presence in the system. I don't know, Lucy, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
Well, I think you explained it perfectly. I was actually just going to complement that answer by perhaps asking Doug for his perspective, because he's been working with Tavita and COLE from SPC and SPREP respectively. So Doug is working with us on the development of the ODIS architecture. So sorry to put you on the spot, Doug, but perhaps you could also give a perspective on your experience, at least, how straightforward it is and how possible it is.
Sure, no, I'd be happy to. And I think that, you know, all the presentations and you and Pierluigi have framed this actually quite well, right? The goal is to focus on utilizing web architectural standards, right? And so, you know, one of the nice things about this is that the structured data is in JSON. So it's a standard serialization approach that we're used to, that's placed inside web pages, served using standard web architectural patterns, retrieved and indexed using those standard web architectural patterns. And then those indexes that are created are using existing open source graph databases that then we query using JavaScript, right? So again, you know, I think as Pierluigi pointed out, this is, you know, it's not bleeding edge. We don't want it to be bleeding edge, right? We want it to be something that's production. We want it to be something that is within the tool set of you know, a wide range of people. I'm happy to you know, go into more detail if you wish, but you know, I think that, you know, just overall that kind of, you know, sets it as a very standards-based approach to the publishing and harvesting of structured data. I'm happy to speak about any specific details if someone wanted or to show things.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah. So if anyone else has any further clarification, Doug is always available to help us out on that one. Just to, from my end, you know, following on from Taco's question, I just wanted to know in terms of the other two regions, you know, their progress with this initiative, particularly looking at, you know, the initial stages testing of the interoperability of their systems. How has the progress been with the other two regions? My apologies, I haven't been able to participate in other webinars, or else I would have better understood what's happening on the other side of the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Sorry, was that directed to me? Sorry, I missed
to
that.
anyone, either you or Pierluigi. Yeah.
So in the other two regions, well, the Latin America and Caribbean region, for example, we held a webinar for that region earlier today. So it's been quite a long day for some of us. In that region, we're working closely with several partners, including InfoHub and the Caribbean Marine Atlas Project and the CLME Plus project. And we're developing a partnership with the Sargassum Information Hub. So we already have quite a well-established partnership with marinetraining.eu, and the CLME Plus training portal that is specific to the LAC region is a sub-portal of marinetraining.eu. So we have quite a good partnership going there. The partnership with the Sargassum Information Hub is new and growing. And InfoHub, of course, is a long-established partner, and they were pivotal in the project proposal development, as well as the development of the clearinghouse mechanism for the transfer of marine technology, which was like a pilot for the ODIS concept. So InfoHub is also going to be working with us on implementing the ODIS architecture into their web-based systems. And so so we have a few different avenues of work in the Latin America and Caribbean region. In Africa, we've also got several implementation partners. Some of them are really just starting to look at the patterns. So examples of those are Cordio, Bioparma, and the Marco South project. They're quite diverse projects. Bioparma is associated with the Regional Resources Hub, Cordio is an NGO, and Marco South is a project, but it's closely associated with the national databases of South Africa. And we are holding a webinar for the Africa region on the 10th, on Thursday. Something else we're doing with the Africa region is developing a new database of training opportunities. So that will be another subportal of marinetraining.eu. And that's being developed with additional funding that's coming in from NORAD. But we're also supporting the IOC Africa office with additional personnel support so that they can also strengthen some of the systems that are feeding into the OceanHub InfoHub project, like their Ocean Expert repository, and also actually developing content for the new database of training opportunities for Africa. So quite a few things happening, yeah, on different levels in those regions.
Thank you, Lucy, and that's great to hear. You know, all these collaborations happening. So, Taco, you have your hands raised. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you again. I have a question to Lucy. You already explained about the training courses and the many partners already starting to implement ODIS architecture and building regional ocean info hubs. The project itself will be there for another 2 years. How can the Ocean Info Hub project support the regional initiatives, the existing regional hubs and data portals in becoming Ocean Info hubs?
Thanks, Taco. Yeah, there are a few different avenues for that. I would say one of the opportunities that we weren't able to exploit was the holding of a regional meeting for each of the 3 regions, because of course the project started under COVID lockdown. So there was an amount of funding available for each of the 3 regions to bring some key stakeholders together and discuss regional needs, end user needs, and exactly what the regions were going to be doing. So that has been a bit more difficult to run all of those activities online, but we do still have those resources available in the hope that perhaps next year, we don't know, but hopefully that during the course of the project, we will be able to have at least one meeting for each of the regions. Then of course you've covered the training course aspect.
Yeah.
So training is an important component. It's actually a work package on its own, but of course the training needs to be based on something. So a lot of the work that DAG has been doing is developing documentation. So taking the discussion from our expert group and the ideas and the concepts, and actually translating those into specifications that can be used by any partners, or in fact anybody, because they will be freely available on the web. So developing those resources is a very important part of the project, and that would also assist any partner that wanted to join. Then in addition to just having those that documentation and those resources available, we also have developer support. So for example, DAG is available at the moment to answer some questions, to work with some partners to the limits of his time, of course. And so that is an additional support. On top of that, if any of the partners or the regions request additional support, we can look at that. For example, the Africa region approached the project and said they needed somebody to assist with a bit of time. So we co-funded someone's time to assist with some activities in the region. And that just took a bit of the pressure off Mika in Africa, for example, and assisted him to be able to do his job better and represent the project better. So there's several avenues that we could support the regions.
Great to hear. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lucy, for your comments. And yeah, likewise, great to hear that we have, number of ways from Ocean InfoHub that could provide support to regional hubs. So Tavita, you had a question. You can go next.
Hi, guys. Thanks for all the presentations. It was very informative. I just wanted to note here that I think even in this presentation setting with all the experts in the room, that it is still, at least for me, the content is very, very, very technical. And I'm hoping that some of the training material that you guys have just touched on just now kind of will include some material like in layman's terms. I think for us, conveying the whole idea to our own partners and even internally, with some discussions that we've had with Paul and the team here. Yeah, not only the technical documentation I think would be useful, but like also some very simple graphics or other text materials. So I'm hoping like what you guys come up with for the Africa region is going to be applicable in the Pacific as well. I'm not sure if it's the same sentiment across for Zulfi and our colleagues in SPC, but I think for us here, it's just something that I wanted to know. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Tavita. I just want to say that's a really useful comment and really useful feedback. We need feedback from as many people as possible on the documentation. And so that's great. And we'd love to follow up with you on that offline as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lucy. And thank you, Tavita, for that question. Yeah, it's very important here in terms of digesting all this technical information and how do we actually implement those. We have almost 10 minutes to go. I don't see any hands raised, but I wanted to request my colleague Paul from SPREP if he wants to make some comments, perhaps on the way forward from Pacific Seeds region, working with this Ocean InfoHub project. From my end, one of the things I was something that I was thinking about was, to have more focused group sessions, SPC SPREP with, Doug and Pierluigi and, other experts from Ocean InfoHub on a more regular basis, actually, if, time permits. So we can come to a common understanding as well as, put some efforts really into this initiative. So Paul, yeah, if you wanted to make some comments.
Zulfi, thank you, and thank you for chairing the meeting. Excellent work. Thanks all for the presentations, and Tavita for the really good point. I think right now our reach is very limited, even within SPREP and potentially within SPC. The people who know of this project and understand what the intended outputs are, very limited. In the countries, as far as I'm aware, no reach. So in addition to the communication materials that Tavita was suggesting, something to help communicate more layman's terms, also an early example of just a couple of data sets, something interesting to the Pacific region being shared through this architecture that we could then point to and say, this is what we mean. Like, this is why this is worth investing time and effort into. So it doesn't have to be 10,000 assets, just 5 things that we don't currently have in our data ecosystem in the region, I think would help us in conversations with colleagues to explain why we care, and potentially with countries and national counterparts to explain. Before we didn't have this map of deep sea minerals, now we do. You can use it to do things. So yeah, I feel like this is a kind of a non-technical point, but I think the project has much greater chance of sustainability and uptake if more people know about it early on and are cheering for it. And I'm not a great cheerleader because I have trouble conveying what the practical outcome are for member states. So we're very supportive, we're very keen. We could use some help with both communication materials and some practical examples. And like Zulfi said, if you guys would like to talk on a more regular basis and try to look for some opportunities to try it out and share results and help us with some talking points, we'd be real keen. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks again.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, yeah, great points. Yeah, I just wanted to add on and say, I think, we SPC and SPREP are already, on the same level working together. But I think with this initiative, we could check, wherever we need, a bit of support, and then we could approach, Ocean InfoHub to help us both on that. So yeah, thanks for that. Lucy, if you wanted to make any comments on that.
Well, just to say, yeah, thanks, Paul. Like Tavita, that's a really important point. We should work on communications materials, and we can certainly discuss that offline, definitely. Something that Zulfi raised now was meeting on a more regular basis. And actually, that is something we're doing with a technical working group. We meet every 2 weeks. And we've just started doing that with the Africa regional group. We're meeting every 2 weeks, and we'll probably pick that up, hopefully with the Latin America and Caribbean region too. So it would be great if it would be possible to do the same for the Pacific region. We could just perhaps have a discussion offline again about what kind of time slot would work well, and also for the different regions, bringing Doug in on the technical side as well. He's actually probably a bit closer to you geographically, so I think we could find a slot that suits people. And then if there's a regular meeting, it kind of takes the burden of meeting planning off, and then we can have a very short and focused, even a half-an-hour session every 2 weeks can sometimes be very useful to keep things on track and just share some quick ideas. It can be a lot more effective than emails. So that's a suggestion I'd really like to take you up on as well, and I'll follow that up by email.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Tutor, I see your hands raised. You have the floor.
Thanks, Zulfi. Just to add to the discussion on some of those communication products, and I think the other important aspect to also identify is our target audience, because I mean, listening to the presentation, we have our technical people, and also, but the data, the decision makers around the data, they are not so technical. So it's going to be quite an effort to bring them around to understand the benefits of these systems. So I think those communication aids are key, and also identifying the people that we need to target is also equally important. So who are our data custodians? Who are the decision makers around those data? So that's one group of people. The other group that I mean, for the training that Lucy pointed out, that's specifically for the technical people. What are the what are some of the things that we need to do to target the decision makers on these data? So I'm just thinking out loud on how we can get more penetration into more people understanding what we're trying to do here. Thanks.
Thank you, Tutor, for your comments. Yeah, it's something to look at from the communications perspective in terms of target audience. Pierluigi, over to you.
Just a couple of responses. So on Paul's point on the data sets for examples, I think that's exactly where we need the support from the regions, because we would need your help to identify what would be a compelling data set in your context. You know, that's not something that we would understand, but yes, please do communicate that to us, and we can try to find it. One thing that comes to mind, I know that OBIS, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, they're running a project now called Pac-Man for Pacific nations bioinvasions of invasive species, for example, in the waters there. So that OBIS is already plugged in, and we can perhaps advertise those data sets. But if there are any others that are of high value, let us know so we can set up those demonstrators. It then goes on to Giotto's point. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but so one of the things that's been an issue is that because many of the, let's say, decision makers or final consumers of post-analysis data products, they are looking at interfaces and portals, they rarely see the health of the back end of data systems, you know? And what this often leads to, we've noticed, is that, you know, certain data sets are staged very well for the portals to work, but the back end isn't as scalable or modular. So ODIS is really looking at that back end, but what you're saying, of course, is true, that we need to know what ultimately people want to do with that data. So when we're trying to communicate then to the decision makers about whether or not to, you know, actually work with a system like ODIS, I think it's important to emphasize that we can build regional portals, or rather, the regions can build regional portals. Sometimes the hard part is getting good data, or even discovering the fact that that data exists somewhere in a different region's repository. Maybe they had a cruise in the Pacific, but they never necessarily shared the data. This happens a lot, unfortunately. And so I think that's a case that can be made, and I agree also with the chat comments that we have to communicate that a little bit more clearly to say why it's important that the stuff that they don't necessarily see is in very good shape too. So yes, very well taken, the comments. We will think about that and integrate it into our strategy.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, and in terms of, you know, improving communications and awareness, I think it also comes down to us as, you know, regional partners with this initiative. So yeah, and yeah, so thank you, Molly, for agreeing to help us out on the communications aspect as well. We have 2 minutes to go. Quickly wanted to discuss the Ocean InfoHub webinar that we could possibly have with the Observations Coordination Group webinar series. I think one of the reasons was to actually, you know, make more awareness of Ocean InfoHub and try and link it with other data sharing initiatives perhaps happening globally. So Lucy, you wanted to make any comment on that? Thank you. Sorry, I'm muted.
Just briefly to say thank you, and we'd love to take up that opportunity. I know we just discussed it very briefly over email, but also perhaps in this discussion, since we have other colleagues like Pierluigi, Arno, and Doug here, perhaps you've also had other links, other dealings, and other perspectives on what kind of discussion we've had with the Observations Coordination Group already. I know we have Kevin O'Brien on our technical working group, and he's been very keen to further the links with the Ocean InfoHub and development of ODIS. So yeah, just hoping to get some comments from technical colleagues while we're all in the room together.
Thank you, Lucy. I think we are on time, but we can have a few more minutes if if all agree, but feel free to drop off if you have any other meeting to attend to. And thank you once again for joining in on this really great initiative and great discussion with the Ocean InfoHub. Yeah, just wanted to really quickly mention that with the OCG webinar series, and actually Kevin was the first one, and he was on EDUP, and one of the comments that actually came up during those his webinar was to have more discussion on global data sharing. So that's why I thought Ocean InfoHub is the way to go. So and as we have extracted from this meeting discussion that perhaps there needs to be more awareness of Ocean InfoHub. I mean, it's a really great initiative. So there can be two components if Ocean InfoHub was to give a webinar more on Ocean InfoHub, perhaps in a layman terms, what are the benefits, and how people can engage, and then perhaps we could go a little bit technical as well. I'm sure there's a lot of data scientists, eagerly awaiting to hear on this. So yeah, Doug or Pierluigi, if you want to quickly make some comments, would be nice. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I think that's really nice, and in a sense, almost like a cartoon version of what's happening and why it's important. Like flagging your data so that somebody can find it, etc. That would be quite good for communication. And it's encouraging to hear that from we've spoken. Kevin O'Brien is also in our Slack space from the Goose OCG, and ERDAP. It exports schema.org, and I think that's one of the exciting points here, and why we reuse these web standards, because it doesn't take terribly much to use or to basically support ERDAP in plugging things into ODIS also, right? So we're close, and I think we found the right sort of balance of things and the right place to start. But what needs to be done for that global data sharing is that socio part of the socio-technical system, getting the regions to help co-design what should be shared. We have the technology on how to share it, but it's more like, okay, what should be shared and what kind of common protocol or common language should we have? Protocol in the diplomatic sense, not the technical one. Doug?
No, I mean, I think, I look at it more from the technical side of things, and I agree with what people are saying here. And yes, I mean, a lot of the ERDAP systems are already exporting these types of things. We've been working with Adam Ledbetter as well on prototyping out some of these items, and it allows you to harvest these types of things into the environment. Oh, excuse me here. It allows you to harvest these elements in and mix them up and start finding potentially serendipitous relationships, right, between data, between organization, between vessels, people, elements like that. So yeah, it's all very exciting.
Thank you, Doug, for your comments, and yeah, thanks, Pierluigi, for your comments as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining in. I would like to invite Lucy if you want to say some closing remarks before we end the meeting. Thank you.
Well, I think for me, just to say a big thanks, Sophie, for running the meeting. Thanks to the presenters, Pierluigi, Tobias, and Absentia, Sophie and Paul. Thanks for all the efforts that have come together in where we are today, and we look forward to taking the suggestions from this meeting forward. I think we got some great feedback, great questions, and great suggestions. So just a big thanks from me.
Great, thank you, Lucy, and thank you everyone for joining in. Have a good night or have a great day. We'll see you again in the near future. Take care. Bye-bye.